Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saturday morning D&D show. My name is Jordan with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host Sir Lucian over at Sir Lucian Gaming. But we have a very special guest with us today. It is the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jim Davis from WebDM. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Really great. You seem so excited in this early morning to be here.
I don't remember when exactly I got up this morning, but it was before sunup.
Oh,
so
goodness.
It's kind of like a whole day has already happened.
Oh, wow. Well, we're super happy that you decided to come on our show this morning, and we're just going to chat about Dungeons and Dragons. Before the stream started, we were talking about different conventions, and you just got back from PAX South, correct?
I did. It was our first convention that we did. We actually did our first one last year.
Oh, okay.
And so, we had kind of, I don't know, just sort of already a romance to it. It's in San Antonio, Texas. We normally shoot in Austin, Texas. So it's like not that far away. But we were only able to go for about half a day on Saturday this year. And I like it, right? Like video games are a part of my life that I don't have time for anymore, but I love to like kind of keep up with what's going on and like looking forward to the day I have the free time again to like dive back into whatever current gen console there is or VR, whatever. And so I enjoy being around it. And I like the table. There's a tabletop section there, and I like to represent.
Yeah, I was about to say it's probably a small. Like I lived in Seattle for a while, so PAX there is just bombarded by video games because you've got Nintendo there and Microsoft, and then there was always this kind of like small cubby of tabletop games that seem to have grown and grown and grown until it's now PAX Unplugged has their own little section of it. But I'm assuming PAX South is also video game heavy.
Very video game heavy, some board games and such, but I would say it's like a tabletop section that's sizable enough that we couldn't find like seating at it. And like last year we were just trying to run an impromptu game. We're like, oh, there's a whole area over there. You can just go like play games, thinking it'd be totally easy and no problem. And then, you're hunting for a table. So I remember it being very crowded. It was crowded this year. So like Adventurers League was always filled up, and I don't know. It seems as though it's a healthy part of the hobby now, and I'd love to see that, right? Because for years it was a dirty little secret. No, you're not. What are those books? Don't worry about that. You don't read. It's part of your hobby. Forget that.
What's your favorite video game, out of curiosity? Since you said you were a big gamer.
Oh my god. If in terms of just hours of my life sunk into something, it's a tie between Europa Universalis 3, this sort of like world strategy sim game where you start in like the 1400s and go up to the late 1800s, and I don't know, it appeals to like a very meticulous obsessive side of me. And then Total War is the other one, the sort of strategy battle game.
Total War Warhammer, come on, everybody.
And see, I stopped being able. I don't have a PC that runs them anymore, and so I was like, all those years, I was like, all you guys had to do is team up with Games Workshop. Like, all you need, it'd be an amazing game. Like, why isn't this happened? And then it's like, all right, PC gaming, I'll see you guys in 20 years. And they're like, oh, now that he's gone.
Yeah, we got to
make all of these games. I'm just like, anyway.
It is so good. Yeah, I just sunk 80 hours into it just this past week. I've been playing it a lot. But yeah, so it's super cool. Jordan's, we're going to good cop, bad cop, because Jordan's going to throw you them softballs. But I'm here for those hard hitting questions. I'm not letting you off. I have heard
that's great
that you actually have been working with the Zentarum quite a bit, but I've uncovered, and I believe you're actually a Dimir spy, aren't you?
Easily, right? I mean, it's not something I like to talk about openly, or for that matter, would reveal the full truth of. But Dimir, part of Bregan Darth, whatever I need to be. There's probably one of the Eberron houses I'm would like membership of as well.
Yeah, just throw them all in there.
Sure, right? Like, why limit yourself to one prime material?
Right. No, so we've seen Dungeons and Dragons really explode this last year with all of these supplements coming out. The books are coming out at a faster pace. We got campaigns coming out at a faster pace. We're seeing other things besides Forgotten Realms, the big stalwart What do you think about all that? What I mean, you guys are live and breathe Dungeons and Dragons content right now.
Right.
What do you feel about where we're at with it right at the moment?
I last year was my year to take a break from 5th edition. As YouTubers, D&D is sort of like always going to be the big draw. When you venture outside of that, you start getting less eyeballs on the content. And as much as I love to just sort of chat about D&D, I also make decisions like that when we're making videos and the like. And so I was like, I need a bit of a break. I'm going to run my one game of 5th edition. That's my game. It's weird. It's gonzo. It's science fantasy. It's not for everybody. And play other systems, other games. And it's been really refreshing because as I return back to 5th edition and Ravnica kind of pulled me back in to like, oh, what's going on over here? I'm excited, right? Their team's grown. They've been hiring like crazy. I didn't catch the streams and spoilers thing from a few weeks ago, but I kind of read a recap of it somewhere, and it seems as though they're going to pick up the pace of production, and I'm excited, right? Like I want them to feel free to experiment, to do things differently, to not feel like they've got to always cater to this mix of like the nostalgia crowd by pulling on D&D's lore and the like, and also the people who are the new players coming in or coming in through streaming. I'd like for them to feel that they can cater to a lot of different audiences and offer a lot of different products, because that's what makes the hobby great.
Yeah. I guess go ahead, Lucian.
They did spoil the next campaign is going to be a nautical campaign. So we were wondering
that's kind of maybe Lazar principalities. I mean, that's my dream, right? Like that's what I want, because I always like that part of Eberron. But you could do like Up and Down the Sword Coast, or who knows, right? Maybe just do something new, right? Like, we could do that. Dare to dream of something new, a new campaign setting, unique to 5th edition would be kind of awesome, right?
I really kind of wish that they would do something like that, like to be able to build a new, kind of like what they did for Eberron, where they kind of sent out a bunch of, here, everybody write us a sentence about your thing. Okay, we like that sentence. Now write us a paragraph. Now write us a paper on this world, and then take the best one. And so you kind of, you filter out these really great ideas to like a really great idea. And Eberron is just beloved by so many people. It would be interesting if they did something like that again, but
I'm right there with you, because to me, Eberron like so encapsulated a 3rd edition style of D&D. And as much as I think 5th edition fits a lot of different versions of Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of different ways you can play it, like I want to see something that's built from the bottom up with 5th edition's assumptions in mind, and that all of it's baked in, instead of what I feel is like opposite, where they're taking all this lore and stuff from the prior editions of the game and saying, oh, this new rule set totally works with it. Like, and I've done that, right? I've converted things from 1st and 2nd edition on the fly. It's not that it's not a challenge if you're familiar with it. And so what I want to see is something like that, where it's like, let's take 5th edition and do something special for it. Let's really showcase what makes it unique, build up the inspiration mechanic, really work backgrounds into something unique and special like they did in Ravnica. Yeah, I'm right there with you. That'd be awesome.
I love the Forgotten Realms, obviously, but there is so much of it that they're like, well, here's Curse of Strahd, and it's actually a demi-plane on the Shadowfell, and that's how we'll make it work. And when I was at Gen Con, they were talking about Eberron and saying, like, they wouldn't allow Eberron to become a part of 5th edition until they could figure out lore-wise how does it fit in with the Forgotten Realms. And it's like, okay, well, there's this like weird spatial expanse between the Forgotten Realms and Eberron, and that's how we're going to justify it, because it has to be all one world. Like everybody's campaign is part of this larger world. And I'm like, does it have to be? I mean, we're making up a game here. Like it's all pretend.
Yeah. And particularly without like reviving one of the meta settings like Spelljammer or Planescape that would provide a structure for linking all these worlds together themselves. So that seems to me to be like, but part of what makes Eberron unique is that it's a different cosmology and a different thing. So I'm happy for it to be just its own thing. Same with like Dark Sun, it's supposed to be difficult to get there, otherwise people would just leave. Like they just open a gate and walk to paradise.
There's water over here, excuse me.
These halflings aren't going to try to eat me. I like that they all have a different take on the cosmology of D&D, because not everything needs to be the Great Wheel and the outer planes are like this and the inner planes are like that. It could be I don't know, we could revive 4th edition's cosmology and keep that as its own thing as well. So yeah, I like that. There's room for a lot of different things.
And it feels like things go, the creative world building goes in cycles too for them, because you had the early stuff that's being driven by Gary Gygax and some of the different fantasy authors that they bring in during that time. So we get the start of Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, Dragonlance, and all that cool stuff based on kind of like a lot of fantasy author kind of stuff. And then we get into 3rd edition, moving towards 4th edition. You get the Monty Cook, the Bruce Cordell. You're kind of moving out into the Planescapes and the Dark Suns. We're making it a little science weird, a little adding that stuff in. But then it kind of goes away again. And so I'm interested, what would be the creative team when you've got Jeremy and Chris and Mike Merles, and they get to say, okay, this is our creative thing, not just redoing or making what they have seen before. So I think it'd be cool if they ever did get a chance. If they do, I don't know. We'll see. Have to find out. So it's cool. You are running a very fun campaign right now. Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure some people have watched it, but not everybody gets to tune in live for 4 hours and catch the show. How's it been going? Where are you at in that campaign at the moment? How's things going?
Gosh, we're so Land Between Two Rivers is the game, 5th edition game that I run on our Twitch channel, WebDM /Twitch or Twitch/WebDM, whichever one it is.
You just lost half your audience. They went to the wrong link.
Yeah,
so.
And so it's like Thursdays, I think it's like 7 Eastern. And so it's a mishmash of all of my favorite parts of what inspires me about Dungeons and Dragons, what I love about the various settings of it. So it's like take the Mournland from Eberron and like all, you know, some of the flavor of Dark Sun and bring that over and mix it with like this some of these catastrophes that I inflicted on one of my homebrew worlds as a result of TPK and players just deciding to not give a damn about the big quest and to do their own thing and be like, well, that means the bad guys win. All right, we'll just keep playing. And and so it's this weird I call it like a science fantasy post-apocalyptic kind of setting where I want a mishmash of, is that magic? Is it science? Is it something in between? And to couple that with a D&D setting that removes a lot of the traditional fantasy elements to make room for new ways of seeing like orcs and goblinoids and gnolls and the place of magic in the world, and to take a world that used to be like chivalrous and trad fantasy, you know, and through player actions it was ruined and destroyed, and the drow got what they wanted and all the lithids got what they wanted, and the blood war took place there for a couple of centuries, and you know, it's thoroughly wrecked and is now like Mad Max, somewhere between Mad Max, He-Man, and you know, I don't know what else. And
what else do you need?
What else do you need? And also to take that, and also my DM philosophy for this one has been to not introduce anything in the world that doesn't demand to be interacted with by the players. And so it's been phenomenally easy to prep for and get ready to run this campaign, because in the past it would have been like, oh, there's like how many villages out here? There's 3d6 in this hex alone, and like, God, they all need names. And I dispensed with all that and instead went with like an ethos of this needs to be playable. Like, it doesn't matter that the villages here would have X amount of population density or whatever. It matters that there's a handful that are very iconic, and when you visit them, they say something about the world, that they have NPCs you want to talk to, or in the case of my campaign, Flame Strike, because they're false prophets, and you have to deal with false prophets very harshly, and then also have it react to the players in a way that feels satisfying to me, that like keeps it moving and things going on in the background. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. In session to session, it's more of borderline evil game, I would say. But we don't really play with
players, or do the DM?
Both, right? Like, it's a hell world. This place is bad. You know, people worship monsters because they're the only creatures out there that can protect them from other monsters. You know, or just a madman that can create water is like a dictator over the 30 people that they're able to supply water to. It's not a pleasant place. And so like they made characters who were, you know, drow tiefling assassin, you know, types, or like lizard folk rangers that lead people off into the desert. And when they get lost, they just come back, and if there's meat there, they'll eat it. They'll take their stuff and sell it. You know, I didn't kill them. I just got them lost. And then the last human to exist is in the party. And
it felt like really like a John Carter of Mars feel. So, yeah. When I saw you pitching it at the very beginning, I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool.
It's John Carter of Mars is definitely on my mind when I'm doing. We had a video a couple of weeks back on our YouTube channel, like science fantasy and sort of inspirations for it. And a lot of that is baked into this, and I just love it. The players, I present them with sort of like this half-baked setting, you know, 3 pages basically of setting material. It's like, here's a kind of a map, some high points and stuff. Like, does this interest you? And then from there, they would say, like, this is what interests me about that. Maybe there's like a society that my character's a part of. And so it's also been a real collaborative process, as all of the players have said something about the world. You know, in our session 0, I asked them, tell me a secret about the world that only your character knows. I mean, by necessity, that means the DM doesn't know it. So I'm asking them to, like, tell me something about my own world, the world we're going to play in, that not even I know. And starting from like session 0, very beginning with that attitude, has led to like this really great, I'd say, teamwork. As sometimes I have no idea where we're going to go or what necessarily we're going to do. They just play D&D, and it's weird and different. And the next time they're going to have to be defending a bunch of devils from converting a celestial or like corrupting it. And, you know, they're going to have to fight off a bunch of wastelanders who are trying to stop that, because they're like, we don't want this devil to, you know, and that's the sort of D&D we're playing now. And I personally love it. So it's great.
That's awesome.
What kind of, like you were saying, magic is science and things like that. So do you have a wizard or a druid or a cleric in your party?
We had the beginning party was a barbarian, ranger, and then a druid, cleric, and bard.
Okay.
So we didn't have any warlocks, no wizards, no sorcerers, and those were like the 3 classes that I really kind of formed the world around. In many ways, the world was sort of like, what if you really had to go out there and find your spells, wizards? Like, what if there was no one to teach you? What if you didn't have a tutor? What if the only thing you were was like this orc who's like 3rd generation from the last time anyone ever saw a human, picking through the buried ruins of a mage's tower, and you're like, this is a book, something. I know that the priests back in the village tell me that if I find things like this, it's dangerous, but I don't know, maybe the spell book has a, you know, an enchantment on it that allows anyone to read it who opens it. Or maybe they run across something in the desert that makes a pact with them, and now they have all this power. And then that's sort of, I really thought a lot about how those 3 classes would interact. You might see sorcerers as being very dangerous. Like, they're just born with this. They could just do this. Like, they didn't have to work for it. They have to sacrifice anything. And then warlocks being very common. But then everybody, they went their own way with it. And so in a setting like that, I tend to think of all full casters as they're just mages. And how they interpret their magic, how they present it, is up to them. And then I'll build things off of that. And I also like to do other things where it's like, oh, you might know, like, you don't know Find Familiar, but you know how to call a desert animal to your side and have it do something for you. So I like magic that's between cantrip and 1st level, and to like give it out as a reward or something like that as well. So I'm mixing and matching and doing all kinds of things, presenting magic items as technology and vice versa, that kind of thing.
Is do you have gods and stuff, I assume, that see over this world, or have they abandoned this world? I'm really curious about this campaign setting now.
Yeah, George's like, I want in.
They abandoned it long ago, which is part of why it's such a hellscape.
Okay.
In the context of the world, this was my first 3rd edition campaign world, and it was very like, I was like, oh, I only really know Warhammer, so it's like Warhammer with the serial numbers filed off, which is, you know, pastiche. And the whole point of the game was to stop this drow who was using vampiric magic from blotting out the sun. And around 16th level, the party allowed themselves to be convinced by one of their members to attack a powerful ally. a draconic wizard who was gonna help him. But I was like, oh, it's 3rd edition. Not all red dragons have to be evil. Like, I'm gonna have a neutral red dragon in the game. And they just couldn't resist the lure of Dragon Horde and attacked him. And after its simulacra killed half of them, and it stepped out of the shadows of like, oh yeah, this thing melts into a pile of illusion and snow, and then the real dragon shows up. 2 of the party members immediately dropped their weapons, surrendered, and the other one defiantly charged. I think I ate him or something. and so it was just this. It was a weird moment for me campaign wise, because I was like, well, the drow win, like they blot out the sun. The next time we play, it's like, 100 years later, you guys it's your toast. Like there's no sun, like it's a frozen wasteland. Mm-hmm. And then the end of that game had a bunch of celestials and angels and all sorts of forces returning, overthrowing the drow, kind of like getting the world back in some kind of order. And for Land Between Two Rivers, I just decided that process took like several centuries and thoroughly wrecked the place. And by the end of it, the gods were either dead or had just been like, this isn't worth it, and went on to do other things. And so no one in the party has been like, interested in finding out where the gods went. The one cleric in the party is a cleric of Baba Yaga, who I present as a wasteland spirit who is harsh and the like, but no one's really gone and looked for any deities or anything. If they do, we'll figure out something weird and messed up that happened to them.
Yeah, you need to run a Mutant Crawl Classics game.
See, that's my supplemental rule book.
Okay.
Mutant Crawl Classics is the rule book that I turn to when I need a quick ruling on like how this airship works,
okay,
or what to do with this piece of technology. It's my hidden supplementary DMG for the campaign.
Nice. I love it. Yeah, the way you were talking about, magic is technology and stuff, and yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. I buy the modules to mine for just ideas and things like that. So it's really fun.
So that's present day Jim Davis, but
yeah.
I feel like we need to know, how did this whole thing start? How did Jim Davis get into Dungeons and Dragons? Was it Dungeons and Dragons? Did you get into something else and get to Dungeons and Dragons, or did it start with Dungeons and Dragons?
It did not start with D&D. Well, it started with D&D in the sense that when I was around 10 or 11, I ride the school bus to every morning, and a group of us neighborhood kids would just gather at the end of the street, and one of them, who would eventually be my future dungeon master, had a monstrous manual from 2nd edition, and that's got like all the Tony de la Terzi, I always butcher his name, art in it. Just the great, like, iconic monstrous manual, the ecology sections and what these gnolls do all day, and it was great to just read. And so I was aware that there were these games out there that did something with these imaginary creatures. Like they made a game of these make-believe things. But for me, it was Warhammer. My first role-playing game I ever played was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay through Hero Quest. Mm-hmm. And so Hero Quest led to the supplements, which led to Advanced Hero Quest, which led to Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And even though I had friends who invited me to a Dungeons and Dragons game, I showed the player's handbook to my parents. I was probably like, 11 or 12, like still that age where you got to get permission to do anything. And they objected to some of the more, I don't know, religious themes of the game. I guess it wasn't like a satanic panic thing. They were actually just like, oh, anyone can raise dead in this game? Like, I don't think so. That's something only Jesus can do. They're just like, but it's make-believe. And so instead they bought me Realms of Chaos, Slaves to Darkness. If you know it, it's got the whole human, and and they just for whatever reason, D&D was the game to avoid, and Warhammer was fine. And so we had the minis. I had fantasy role play. I played the battles game. I ran through first game of Enemy Within just like by myself. Like I made 4 characters and just was like, how do I do this? What would this look like?
You're talking my language.
Yeah. And then it was like I wrote my brother into it, who was like 7 and had no patience for any of this. And we'd just fight all the time about these games. And it wasn't until I found Star Wars, West End Star Wars, and then that led me to playing with friends who were, fans of Star Wars as well. And this entire time I'm also playing Warhammer 40K and Necromunda and all the Games Workshop games. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school that I started working at a movie theater that the aforementioned DM who would bring the Monster Manual also worked at, as well as Pruitt, Travis, everybody. And I'd like gone to school with them, but I wasn't like friends with them through school. It wasn't until I worked there and they ran a game after the final movie was started. They'd all go in the manager's office and start playing D&D. They'd play till the morning, not sleep. The movie theater would open late. All the shows would be messed up. Just but who cared, right? Like we were playing D&D all night, and we're 18, 19, and typical antisocial neckbeard kind of gamers. And that's my introduction, was like at the tail end of second edition. I had flush with cash, bought every book I could find, and then when third edition came out, I was ready to go. And it was also one of those moments where we would sit around and everybody would be like, man, it'd be awesome to play D&D. It was like 8 of us, free time, flush with free time. It'd be great to play D&D, and no one makes that step of saying, I'll run a game. I just got so impatient to play. I was like, I'll run. I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me. And that's how I found myself always running games. Basically. And the other DM in our group was a killer DM who was just a real hard ass. So most people just didn't like playing in his games. I kind of felt bad, but I was like, hey man, I went through 3 characters in the first adventure. I'd rather not have to do that. Like, anyway.
That was at the top of my show notes was, can we talk for hours about the love of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Editions 1 through 4? Because that was my book, and that was the one that I had D&D friends, but I couldn't convince them to play it. Like, they just want to play D&D.
Yeah, they didn't.
Like, no, this book's good. I'm like, you should read through it, and I loved it. And the coachman and Nolan, and you're going to fight the cultists in that very first adventure. I made characters myself, played through it myself because I couldn't get my friends to play it. And I was like, but they'll play D&D. I could get into any D&D campaign I wanted, but I was like, no, I want to play Warhammer.
That's what it was for years. The 3 games we played were D&D, West End Star Wars, and then whatever big White Wolf game was out. Whatever the newest White Wolf game was, werewolf, vampire, whatever, we'd play that. And I loved Warhammer. It had its own unique, weird flavor. I liked that it had guns in it. I like that the demons seemed really scary and really bad news, and that it seemed to have an edge to it. Fun story, I actually playing in my first Warhammer game ever. I've always run Warhammer. And in the second adventure, I had to spend my 1 fate point to keep my character from dying because they took 1 hit and it was like a pierced heart. I was like, shit. The second keep my dark elf pirate.
You roll them dice, it tells you where it hits. You can explode on damage. All of a sudden, stuff can go terribly wrong very quickly.
So great.
You lose an arm, and you're like, "What? What is going on here?"
Sounds like Deadlands almost.
It's very very grim. I've played all of them but third. But yeah, I bring a lot of that sensibility with me to my Dungeons and Dragons games. For years, Emma, my partner and also part of WebDM, would complain about how grim dark my D&D was. Just like everybody's an asshole and a cynic, just like betraying us. Like, oh, what are you gonna do? Like, if they all got along, there wouldn't be an adventure.
For Sigmar.
So it's always informed how I play. I think because it was the first one.
Very cool.
It's story rich, very story rich.
So Land Between Two Rivers, you're creating a lot of these campaigns and what have you. Have you ever thought of publishing an adventure that you wrote?
I have. Because
it sounds really cool, and you're developing a whole bunch of stuff. Like, I want to play in Land Between Two Rivers. Like, I want a campaign setting book.
I'll send you the primer that I sent the group here in a bit. But I have a lot of like scattered stuff. Part of the thing for me that I work on now that I didn't used to so much is organization. I used to just like, here's my spiral notebook, whatever chicken scratch ends up in it is how I planned, and it's always forward, never back. That's how I used to run games. And it was fine for the 4 or 5 people that the friends that I play with. We had 7 hours, and you could take 20 or 30 minutes to be like, oh, hey, let me think about this thing. Somebody go grab some food. Y'all take a smoke break, whatever it is. but when you only have like 3 hours to play, and there is a participatory or performance component to it, I've had to feel like, well, I don't want to spend all my time prepping, but I do want to have what I need at hand. So it's weird. I find myself being very productive and in a different way, but the thought of like publishing is a weird mental thing for me, because I'm just like, I'm not a writer, and it's sort of like, am I even any good at this? I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Maybe.
Is this
that sounds like a hint?
Talking about the
like
yeah. You heard it here first, folks. It's coming out 2019 December. No. The streaming aspect of D&D has changed the hobby a lot. And obviously, like, what are the, aside from a performance aspect, like, how are you prepping games differently from a game you're just going to play with your friends, as opposed to this performance aspect? Like, you're presenting something for someone to consume that obviously changes your mental faculty for it, I believe. Or does it? Yeah.
I try not to let it too much. I don't usually have the stream open. I don't usually have the chat open. I really want it to be me and the players. And then whatever comes out of that, if it's enjoyable, great. If not, I personally am not here to like be a performative GM. I'm just here to kind of put my money where my mouth is. You know, I do DM advice. You might as well be able to watch me DM. And so as long as I'm going to do it, I'm going to do as gonzo weird, kind of game as I can. I gave players a cubic gate at level 9 because it's like, I want you guys to get in trouble with those 6 planes. Like, go to them. I want to prep an adventure for you guys in Mount Celestia. Like that. That's how I think. And for me, that was a personal shift a few years ago that I've grown and developed, where I would look at things like, man, that almost always Pruitt would come with some overpowered, can kill my monster in one hit sort of monstrosity that he found online somewhere. And all I could think of was like, how do I rein this in? Like, how do I stop this? And the moment that it became different for me was, how do I make this work for the game? And accept the fact that Pruitt wants to just do buckets of damage, and that's going to be a challenge, and not just him. Most of my players were optimizers in some way, and accept that that's part of the challenge, and also accept that like the inconsistency of it is part of the deal. Some nights we're off. I felt like I did a crap job last week. Like, we played a couple nights ago, and I would describe it as like one of my worst nights of gaming. But the party explored a village that had been taken over by devils. They made some deals with some devils. I got to role play sort of off the cuff a variety of like different infernal, fiends and the like. It was really fun in that respect. And a lot of it I had to come up with on the fly. So I think the long-winded answer is that I want it to be engaging for the players. And so I want my NPCs to come alive. I want my settings to come alive. I want there to be interesting things to do. And I hope that translates into something people enjoy watching or can get something out of.
I know when I'm running a lot of my campaigns, because I'm having lots of, like, almost like you're saying, like I'll be hot and I'll be cold. I'll feel like, I kind of didn't do what I thought I could do there. Like, I stumbled in an NPC conversation all of a sudden, or I didn't do a voice, or whatever it might be, because you see a lot of other really good DMs out there and you kind of hold yourself to all kinds of crazy standards. So I wonder too, do you feel like when you make a mistake, how hard are you on yourself about this? Or are you just able to brush off and say, hey, sometimes we make mistakes, I'll just come back next week and do it? Or are you the kind of person that really just kind of dives in on yourself and say, man, why did I do that? What was going on there? Why did I make that?
No, I maybe I used to be real harsh and critical, but certainly not anymore. If I forget something, I'll text a player. So like, hey, we did that, when this interaction happened with the thing, I forgot to mention XYZ. I think this is relevant to your character. We, in Land Between Two Rivers, one of the players, TK Johnson, takes pretty extensive notes in a shared document that we all have. And part about what's great about their notes is I can go back in and clarify something, and I can also go in and read what at least they picked up, and like, oh, that's what they thought this was about. Yeah, maybe that's even better what I thought it was going to be in presenting it. And we just we all kind of agree not to investigate the cracks. You know, that part of this whole thing is that you're putting this together as it goes, and so it's going to be rough around the edges, and you smooth it out in play. But you know, if digging into inconsistencies and weirdness and sort of like it was this way last week and this way this week, or something minor changed, then I'm not your dungeon master. There's other dungeon masters out there for you. But
yeah. Do you feel like your campaigns went from this was Jim Davis's world and here's all this stuff I'm telling you, to now start bringing in player agency as you've gotten, you know, years have gone on, and you're like, now I want them to help me build the world. It's not just my world,
definitely.
And it's I'm doling it out to them. I'm actually letting them, hey, what's the name of that village? You guys can do that. Is that how you feel where you're moving to in your GM career now?
Yeah, and it's a balance that I shift even session to session. And you know, it began, I would say, you know, years ago, decade or more, where it was just sort of like, oh, you like this thing about whatever, like I'm going to include it in my world. Or, you know what, I haven't thought at all about the place of monks in my setting. Why don't you fill it in? And it started like that. It started as, man, I'm pressed for time. I just don't know, or I can't come up with anything compelling. You do it. And then over time, it's grown into more active in the session, in the moment, using different techniques. There's one I learned from the Gauntlet, which is a podcast network that they talk about like indie games and OSR games. And one of the DMs there, Jason, has this thing where he's like, he asks players to tell them what their character sees about a setting that's significant. And so you set the frame, you say like, hey, you know, example I used from Land Between Two Rivers was this: an enemy had invaded their home, and a lot of the peoples that they would otherwise consider their sort of friends or allies or, you know, fellow citizens were refugees, basically. And so I was like, you guys arrive at the headquarters of this druidic order. Around it is this chaotic but you know, not squalid camp of refugees. Tell me what your character sees that stands out to them or is notable about this scene. So I've set the parameters. They're not going to go bring in something that's crazy or doesn't fit the tone. But they get a moment to describe something about the game and participate and contribute. And you can do that with a lot of things. You know, what is it that a fellow player does or a fellow character does that really annoys you? What is it about this 4-week journey that's just gotten on your last nerve? And that throws a lot of those moments in the game where as a DM, you're struggling to come up with evocative language and how do I present this thing and what does it look like and how do I get my players to give a shit? And when you open that space up to everybody, you really, all those things that causes a lot of GM's anxiety that you're maybe over there like doing a lot of work to prevent can be eased by saying, hey guys, there's 5 of us here. Surely we can come up with something better than just me. And I still maintain that traditional structure of the DM having control of the pacing of the game. It's still D&D, right? We're not getting rid of the GM over here like some games.
Diceless.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that they exist. If you have fun with them, more power to you, but they're not my games. But I like the shared experience of it. So I like giving up some of the DM's traditional control there to the players. It's fun. And really, they seem to like it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it creates a investment in the world when you have your players do that. And that's something that I really like to use at the table. But I feel like some of my players are not as creative as they think they are or want to be, but at the same time you just kind of like, oh, that's a great idea, let's build on that. Does anyone else at the table want to like
it's a muscle like anything. It's a skill, you know, and to expect yourself to be like instant creative and come up with the most unique thing all the time. First off, God, like why pressure yourself like that? Jeez.
Yeah.
Second off, that's what random tables are for. That's what the blogosphere that encompasses all of D&D and then just the hobby in general is for. But it's also like other people. You start out with something and then someone else goes, oh yeah, what if, or you could build on it and say like, ooh, but maybe this thing. And I personally do that with a lot of the things I introduce in a campaign where I'll think about something and then I let it sit and I try to forget about it and then come back later and go, all right, well, I wanted it like this, but what can I do to make it different? And then at least 2 or 3 times so that you can take a cliched idea and work it enough so that it's fresh and new and different. That's the same thing with players coming up with stuff off the table. And, you know, if you got a player at your table who's new at this and they're trying to come up with it, help them, encourage them. Other players as well, like, oh yeah, I really like that. What if it looked like this as well, or it did this thing, or you add to the description of it. Yeah, it can bog down play. You're not going to get through combat as fast, or you're going to drag through a shopping scene or something. But like, what are you in a hurry for?
Yeah.
This is the game you're playing and this is the moment you're in. Like, make it come alive and make it be something special. And then you worry less about like, God, I got to get through this combat or get through this thing, or they have to do this thing. It's just let it sit for a while. But I don't know. I can ramble on and on about it.
Well, speaking of DM and Dungeon Master advice, you guys, your whole show is based upon this, like just helping Dungeon Masters and players and what have you. And you obviously saw the tweet because we're out there saying, hey, does anybody have questions for Jim on the show?
I saw some of them.
A couple of them were, most of them were actually really good. And one stuck out to me just kind of as we're talking about players and Dungeon Masters. And I think this also, last week on the Saturday Morning D&D show, we were talking about the challenge rating and how it's kind of broken for 5th edition. But Smug Coffee Man, he asked a really good question where how do you threaten your players without becoming adversarial? And it made me think of your Simulacrum Dragon. Like, in especially that sense, like, how do you just smash your players and then not walk away from the table being like, well, I killed you all. I'm the Dungeon Master. I win. Yeah.
I try deliberately not set up situations like that. And so there's a lot of times with DMs, you can over prep a thing, particularly an encounter, and it's like, oh, this effect's going to do that. And it's going to have this and it's going to have these special abilities. And then you start to go like, well, all right, well, where are the PCs in this? Where, they are the unknown element here. So I try to be very clear about the intentions of my NPCs in moments of high tension. So an example in Land Between Two Rivers, a few weeks back, the party had been pursuing an assassin who'd attempted to kill one of the players. And I was very clear with them at that time when I was like, I am an assassin. My character's an assassin. They are trying to kill you. I just failed. I didn't roll enough damage. You survived. They're pissed. Plan B. And so the plan B was to lure them out into a location in the desert and to hire just as many gross, badass desperados as they could to take on the party and just like trap them and ambush them in this town. And they did. They just got the wrong one. One of the players, my brother's druid, Baloo, who I made a whole custom druid class for that reflected like this druid of the wastes whose connection to the land was one of like anger and rage, and they could spend their hit points to do extra damage.
Nice.
And I fingered of deathed him, and it did double his max HP.
Oh,
and he dead. And he only had like 12 hit points left because he'd gotten caught in a wall of fire. I'd already dropped one of the PCs to 0. They were like 9th level, and according to Kobold Fight Club, this would have been a triple deadly fight. It was like a blue slod, an ogre mage, and then some other custom, like I built some NPCs and had stuff to him. But it was a tough fight. And I was very clear. It was like, yeah, they are trying to kill you. She is your enemy. The assassin has a, you are her target. These are the people she's hired to. And it was tough. It was surprised all of us. None of us knew it was going to happen. And afterwards, I was, when the game was over and we were just kind of like backstage chatting, I was like, yeah, let the player know, let Josh know, hey, first off, this is D&D, right? Death is at 9th level, death is an inconvenience if you want it to be. He was itching to play a new character, so he decided that the character wouldn't be resurrected. But I was very clear. It's like, this is what the logic was with, why they were trying to attack you. And the particular enemy that had cast the finger of death had fought them a couple of sessions earlier and had tried to banish the driver of an air skiff that they were on. And so it would be like, yeah, your driver's banished. That skiff goes tumbling. And I'm always very clear that there's no seats, no siding. It's like a flatbed truck driven by an air elemental that they speed across the desert with. And they've had a wreck once, and it was not pretty. And so I just try to be clear with that. And I might even say, as in that moment, as I'm performing the action, my Knoll Warlock with malice and with lethal intent in his eyes casts a necrotic spell at you. They are trying to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Or this horde of zombies is going to stop and eat downed characters, and maybe I demonstrated on an NPC or piece of set dressing basically, and that's how you convey those things to the players, and then you sympathize with them. You don't gloat, you don't, oh, I got that crit, screw you kind of attitude. And it's, there's a bit of humility in DMing non-adversarially, but still in a challenging way, because you want to make sure that the players, if they're into challenging combats or whatever, even if they're not, like sometimes it can be fun. Not every fight, because it just gets stressful. But it's how you present it. And if you don't gloat, you're not a sore winner. You don't rub it in the players' faces, and you make sure that they have an out when an outcome happens that they really don't want, but might be still not narratively, satisfying or something, that you have some flexibility. Yeah, well, you're not dead, but we're gonna roll on that injury chart from the DMG, or you're out of the count for a while. It's going to take a while for you to recover, or you're changed in some way by the experience. That'd be how I would approach it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I've seen lots of shows, I mean, we do it on our show. You guys do it on your show. There's many other, Matt Colville and all the other shows that are trying to help with new dungeon masters that are coming out, really because the hobby's exploded with new people saying, hey, I'm willing to run a game.
And there's a shortage of DMs because of it, right? Yeah, it's a daunting task that there's very little any instruction for. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you though.
No. And now they're also like thinking, well, maybe I'll stream my game with my friends, or maybe I'll put some cameras on it. And there's all this kind of stuff going on. But there's always still the dungeon master, I think, that's out there. That's the new one, who is, I'm getting ready for my game, but I don't want to run it yet because I'm not ready enough. And so it keeps going on, and then maybe it never happens. So when I see a lot of advice from a lot of us that have been doing it now for a while, we always seem to say, well, how much prep do you need to do? And we always come up with, well, you can improvise this, and I just kind of run with it this way. But I wonder, is that what a brand new DM should be hearing? Because if you're going to say you need to improvise everything, doesn't that really put more anxiety on them to say, well, wait a minute, I have to come up with all of this on the fly now? You don't want to prep because you don't.
Well, and they probably are under the mistaken assumption that being improv is sort of coming up with on the fly requires you to prepare a bunch ahead of time so that you have a big palette. And this is something that the longer I do this, my answer changes. And so we've shot a video for like new DMs, and I think if I was to do it again, I'd give different advice. I think now it would be the classic: start with a location, start with a dungeon, populate the dungeon. That works for a certain style of play, but I'm not sure it works for gamers who are coming in through streaming. I think it worked for an older crowd. I think it can work for people who might come in through more traditional means to the hobby, and it might work for people who come in through streaming, right? Who knows? But I would say if you do Dungeon Master, pick something that inspires you, something that you just like are chomping at the bit to do. Is there a movie or a TV show or a story that really excites you? Is there a way that you can take that and make it your own, using the tools that you might have? The basic set of rules is free, right? Like just start with that. No buy-in pressure, no nothing. And digest the rules enough. You need to know what a D20 is. You need to know how characters' abilities work. Everything else can be learned through play. You don't need to know it all ahead of time, but you should read the rules, right? It's about a balance, because I think that a lot of new DMs see this advice and it's presented as absolutes. You must do this. You must do that. You got to read the whole rule book first. Fuck, there's 3 of them. And there's, you might have a day job or 2 of them, or kids or a family or school or whatever. You don't need all that. That's there when you need it. Those rules are there if you feel like you need a rule to go to check it out. And what you really just need is to know how the D20 works, the difficulty modifiers, DC 10, 13, 15, and the like, how player stuff works, and then to have an idea of a problem you're going to throw at them, a situation you put them in. Let them work through that. Let them play through that. Work through the implications of it. One thing I like about Dungeon World and other Apocalypse World style games is you're playing to see what happens. and don't put pressure on yourself to get it to a different place or to feel like you need to steer it in a certain direction. A lot of the bad behaviors of DMing, I think, stem from that idea of feeling the need to deliver a specific experience. Your bar as a dungeon master is way high compared to a player's bar for a satisfying experience, for one. And it's a learning experience. If all of you are learning, then the first time you guys play, it might be just kind of silly. You might think you're not doing it right, or it's weird. Guess what? It's kind of like anything that you that you try for the first time. Keep at it. Build on what happened the last session. Think about the implications of events that happened. Think about the choices that the players made. Think about their characters and what they are telling you about what they want out of the game. Did they all make fighters? Chances are they want to play a monster fighter game. And guess what? Either you're going to run that game or you're going to run the game you want to run, and they're either going to have to make new characters or deal with that. It's best if you just kind of talk it all out. But it's a conversation that's ongoing, not a thing you have to have locked down before you can do it again. Another example from my own sort of experience this last year is Land Between Two Rivers. I had it cooking for 2 years. It's gone through, it's 8 different maps before I finally was like, all right, this is the last one.
It's shaped like a boot. Finally, I figured it out.
All different backstories for the world, what it was like, how it was going to be put together. And finally, it was just, it required having some players who were like, we want to run a game, and me going like, well, I've been thinking about this. I'll just run this game. And then 3 months later, starting up Land Between Two Rivers before it came alive, and all of that, most of that prep in those 2 years is, I'll use it somewhere else or something. That's where I would start. Find what inspires you. Don't worry so much about it. Strike a balance between what you have time for and how much complexity you want to add right now.
And enjoy the ride, because it's great that there's so many people coming in, and there's lots of new people and lots of enthusiastic players that are out there. And I think the one piece of advice I always like to give out to any brand new dungeon master, game master, whatever gameplay you're saying, the players that you've gathered want you to succeed. They're going to help you. It's a big team effort. They're all there to have fun. Let them help you have fun doing it too. Don't feel like it's all on your shoulders.
Yeah. And if you have somebody in your group who is not that in that team spirit, that's when you find a moment to just say, hey, we're trying to play a game over here. Are you not feeling it? Do you need to go do something else? There's a lot of pressure, and it'd be flippant to say, oh, well, I just learned by myself, right? Like, we just made characters on our own and solo played for years before we had to cajole family members into, that kind of thing. And that was one way to do it. And guess what? The tools necessary to make this information easily available didn't exist back then. They exist now. Let's take advantage of them. Yeah. And so there's a way to do it that doesn't put so much pressure on you. And if you're watching a big stream, if you're watching like Critical Role or Dice Camera Action or any of the other like big streams, you might think it's got to be a certain way, but no, it doesn't. It can be X's and O's on a notebook paper and post-it note character sheets around a coffee table, and it's still D&D. You'll still have a good time. Yeah.
I remember like just starting being a dungeon master, because I was the same way. Like I was so anxious to play that I couldn't find anyone to run the game, so I'm like, I guess I'll run the game. And to prep for this, I got 2 really good friends, well, my wife now, but at the time we were just dating, and another friend, and I said, I don't understand this game. I think I made a dungeon, there's monsters in it, can we just walk through it? And they were like, oh yeah, sure. And so we did. We rolled dice, and I learned how to play, and they learned how to play, and I learned how to dungeon master, and it was just a really simple, fun experience. And so that's, I guess, my 2 cents is just start small like that. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I've got 8 of my friends, and it's going to be a Matt Mercer show, and this is going to be fantastic. Like, just
you want to dive in, right? Like, part of the fun is the backstories and everything, and I think like indulge in that, if it's not a burden.
Yeah.
But like, just think of a problem for them to solve, and then a problem that might build off of that. And it will escalate, and it'll build, especially if you're able to kind of like sit and look at what the players gave you and see how they all fit together, and then fill in the blanks. That's basically it. That's even advanced. You don't even need to do that at the beginning. That's like 4 days later.
I always like the one thing I heard Matt Colville will say quite often is he'll say, prep as long as you're having fun. So prep as much as you're having fun, and the minute whatever prep you're doing isn't fun anymore, just stop. You're done. You've got everything you need. I like that idea. Do you got like, do you think you yourself is a good example of a brand new dungeon master to say, okay, I'm going to go watch your campaign online, or I'm going to watch the stuff Jim's doing, and that's a really good way to be a DM? Or do you point them at somebody and say, hey, I know you like what I do, but you know who I think is a really good first kind of DM or person to look at? I like the way they do it this way. Like if it was for me, I look at Jerry Holkins from Acquisition Inc. And I'm like, man, if you could ever do a game and run a game like he runs it, he's really cool. Do what he does. Don't necessarily do it the way I do it. Do like what he. Do you got something like that, or do you feel like you're a good example of what a new DM would run?
Gosh, I'm embarrassed to say that I don't really have enough time to get like a lot of experience with other DMing styles. I would say this. Here's what I offer new DMs is an attitude of this game is mine. And I'm going to make it whatever I want. I'm not beholden to canon. I'm not beholden to the rules. It's all up for grabs. And if what attracts you to this is making something your own, of creating a world or space or, anything, then breaking out of the mindset of how should this go versus how do I want this to go, or how does my group want this to go is probably the better question. Is what I think what I offer, because I run things in a very eclectic way. Every campaign I run is different. I prep for it differently. I structure the sessions differently. I just do. Every game is different in that way. And even sometimes session to session, how I prep and prepare and present everything is different. So you might pick up some techniques and things from me. I'm not a very consistent person, so that's my bad. But I am willing to jump in the deep end of this game and to say, you know what, it's fine. We'll figure it out. And the best way to say, play test something is to just start playing. The best way to try something out is to just start doing it. If there's something in one of those books that you're like, man, I can't wait to get this, that sounds like that needs to be in your next session. And that's sort of my attitude and mindset. And if you're looking to like make this game and this hobby like something you just love and want to live and breathe, then maybe there's something there for you. But I also think a new player or a new dungeon master could get something out of it, even if it's not like what I would recommend that they do.
Cool. I know we've got like 2 minutes left, so I'll ask one last quick question.
Sure.
But and this was also from Twitter, but you primarily are a dungeon master, and I think if I heard correctly watching all of your videos that you prefer to be a dungeon master over being a player. That being said, when you do get a chance to play, is there like a back pocket character that you've been sitting on for a long time that you're just kind of like, I've wanted to play this and I never had the chance, or do you craft, like I sit at work when I'm bored and I'll make a Dungeons and Dragons character and I'll put it in this file. And I'm like, if somebody ever approaches me with a one shot, then I go to that file and I grab that character and I'm like, oh yeah, I can finally play that Kobold Rogue that I've been sitting on.
Especially with D&D Beyond, you just like do it and it just sits there and you're like, oh, I gotta clear out my characters, not enough space. Yes, I've got 2 that I really want to do. One of them I've had a chance to play in a one shot. They are a Red Dragon Shadow Sorcerer. A Red Dragonborn Shadow Sorcerer. I wanted to play like a Shadow Dragon cursed to spend the rest of their life as a mortal. So that's not just I used that as an NPC once. It actually Maze of the Blue Medusa, sort of a take on one of the NPCs there. And I was like, I want to play that character. I want to play a dragon who's like, yeah, you got to be mortal now. And to me, they were a Red Dragon Shadow Sorcerer because I like the blend of those two things. The Shadow Sorcerer is great.
Yeah.
Sorcerer class. The other one is I want to get as close to a versatile utility caster using Warlock as I can get. Like, I just want to see how it would work to go like pure arcanist. Like, how many spells can I get? How much magic can I squeeze out of this class? I don't want to do a gimmick. I don't want to have a thing where I multi-class with another thing and do a bunch of weird stuff to get an effect with whatever. I just want to be like a pure Warlock, something probably like Archfey or something like that. But I'll be honest. At this point in my, I really am just kind of like, I'll play 20th level D&D. That's my favorite D&D to play.
Mm-hmm.
I got my 20th level character who I'm ready to go. I know how to play them. It's easy to play a barbarian at 20th level. I don't have to think too much about it. And it's a style of play I really like. So that's really I can never get enough of my auto creator, the 20th level barbarian. That's my real answer.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for coming on. This was just the hour flew by, so it was awesome to have you on. You can find WebDM through any Google search engine. Just type WebDM and I'm sure you'll come up there. They've got the very popular YouTube channel. They're on Twitter and all that other stuff. So follow them, watch their videos, especially if you're a new Dungeon Master or an experienced Dungeon Master. I always seem to pull something new from your videos that
I watch them every time
that
they
change.
come out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, change my mindset or what have you about whatever game I'm currently running. So, yeah. Any final thoughts before we take off?
No, the ones that really drive me good are when you're talking about metagaming. I always get into those videos. I'm like, oh, I want to be on that conversation. But go ahead.
yeah, they're fun conversations, especially metagaming. Final thoughts. I love talking about Dungeons and Dragons. If you guys catch me online anywhere, I'm happy to answer questions. I know these kinds of shows always go by very quickly, and everybody's got something. So
yeah, I had a list of Twitter questions and I got to 2 of them.
I saw some of them. But check us out. We're always trying to improve our stuff over there, and this latest batch of shows I'm particularly proud of because we're changing some stuff with our creative process for like how we develop ideas and present them, and I'm really proud of these. So nice. Yeah, they started this past week with the appearance of Trogdor, my spawn, as in the intro, and we'll only continue from there. So, yeah, there we go. It's a great time. I'd be back anytime, guys. This is great.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be awesome. We'd love to have you back. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for watching the Saturday Morning D&D show. Lucian, any final thoughts before we go?
Nope. Thanks for joining. Thanks for the guest, Jim. You're always welcome anytime you want to come back. And everybody have a wonderful Saturday morning, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.